All right, well, welcome, those of you who are in the room and those of you who are joining us virtually. I am so thrilled to see so many of you here for the kickoff of our social impact speaker series, which is the real kickoff of our 50th anniversary celebration. We are sort of liberally construing our birthday year, like I have been liberally construing my 50th birthday year. We're kind of drawing it out over a few years. Officially, the clinics were launched in 1971. But we will be celebrating well throughout the year. And this series really celebrates the 50 years of excellence of clinical teaching, client representation, community impact, and professional development that has characterized the GW clinics from the start. More than 6,000 clinic alums have passed through our program, and I am so honored and humbled to be leading the clinics at this auspicious moment. I'm Lori Cohn. I am a professor here and the dean of the clinical program, and I took over as the dean from Phyllis Goldfarb a couple of years ago, and I'm really honored to be working with this incredible group of faculty and students. We have so much to celebrate right now. The clinics, with the leadership of Dean Dana Matthew, are really in a period of unprecedented growth. Between this year and next, we will have added 5 new clinics, which is just remarkable. And our clinics have never really reached as many clients as we did this year, 220 this year, nor allowed as many students to provide as many hours of free legal assistance as they have this year. We have provided 72,000 hours of free legal assistance just in this year. And 220 students have participated in clinics. And again, I really thank the dean and our wonderful team from DAR that has helped us do also unprecedented fundraising this year. We've brought in $3 million to support the growth of new clinics, and we hope that that continues to help us meet our goals to provide clinical education to every student at GW who wants to take one. So this speaker series is going to allow us to highlight some of the work of our amazing faculty members, the work of our clinic alums, and the clients that we've worked through the many decades. Some of the faculty we won't be able to feature in these series, but we hope that you will learn about the amazing work that they're doing in our clinic newsletters, which come out periodically. The series also allows us to continue to showcase our alums and to illustrate the impact of clinical legal education on changing education, changing careers, and really changing lives. So a couple of nuts and bolts that I just wanted to tell you about before I kick off the panel, which is really the main event. First is please join us at the reception after this at the Ritz-Carlton. It is, the address we'll provide for you later, but we'd love for you to join us. The reception starts at 6:30. Please keep your masks on unless you're actively eating and drinking or speaking. And if you're online, please put your questions in the chat and we will make sure that they get asked to our panelists. So I'm going to leave it to the faculty to introduce their alums, but I can't resist the opportunity to introduce my amazing faculty. So first, I want to introduce Professor Joan Meyer, who has just been installed as the first holder of the National Family Violence Law Center Professorship. Professor Meyer is a professor of clinical law. She's the director of the Domestic Violence Project and the director of the National Family Violence Law Center here at GW. I mean, as most of the people in this room and joining us today know, she is just a path breaker, and throughout her career, she has really done just groundbreaking work at the intersection of domestic violence and custody. Both producing critically important scholarship, but also doing, which is the hallmark of what we do here in the clinics. She has made a huge impact on making the law more just. And today we also have the great fortune of having Professor Jeff Gutman on our panel. After joining the law school in 1994, after a career at the Justice Department, Professor Gutman has directed and developed the Public Justice Advocacy Clinic. Professor Gutman really is one of the most versatile and talented lawyers and people I know. He has created for that clinic a wide-ranging, really impressive, complicated docket. He's handled his own public interest docket over the years, doing wildly important cases. He served for many years as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs here at the law school. He also teaches first years in civil procedure. And most importantly to me, he was my partner in crime when we first took over directing the clinics. We were co-directors, and he knows there's always an open invitation to return and help me out, but he's not taking me up on it. In any case, thank you again for being here, and I turn it over to Professor Meyer.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you to everyone for being here to learn a little bit about two of our clinics. I want to just say a few words about the structure of the Domestic Violence Project, because mainly I want to leave time for these three fantastic alums of the clinic to talk about what they took from it and what they've done with it since. The Domestic Violence Project is an unusual model for clinical teaching. It's kind of a hybrid of the best, actually, I'm going to take this off, of the best aspects of a field placement and the best aspects of an in-house clinic, in the sense that students get to be placed in the field, working in a wide spectrum of different types of domestic violence law practice in real time, in real life with real lawyers. But they also get a lot of mentoring, training, support, and processing with me as the teacher and with each other in a variety of methods. The structure is that we have a weekly seminar where I cover a lot of different topics across the field of domestic violence. We discuss readings, and they do a lot of experiential practice in that setting. There are biweekly journals where they can share their experiences on paper privately with me. It gives them a chance to process what's going on in their work, gives me a chance to give them private support back in writing, and a lot of depth growth happens in that journal exchange. We also have small groups where they can support each other and exchange notes on things that they're working on and that each other may know something about, and also troubleshoot together what's going on in their placements. And then lastly, there's a final paper or project where I invite students to pull together what they've learned, or what has really sort of, what has given them a bug that they want to know more about, or some way that they want to help the field. So they get a really wide range of options, including artistic projects, traditional research papers, or useful projects to help some part of the field. I've taught two different clinics as well. This is my third model of clinical domestic violence teaching. It's by far my favorite. I think my students probably would say that they've enjoyed it on the whole a lot more than the litigation and other clinics that I taught. It's just a very rewarding balance of experiential and mentoring. I have found, and it's a great way to get your feet wet in the domestic violence field, which is a very intense, trauma-filled arena in which to be learning to be a lawyer. And lastly, I will say, a fair handful of students do get a job out of their placement work that they're doing in my clinic, as you will soon hear. So I'm not actually going to I'm going to ask each of the alums to introduce themselves, but we haven't discussed order.
I'm fine with going first if that's
great. Okay, so Nicole Beck will go first. We have Nicole, we have Melissa, we have Parisa, but I'm going to let them each introduce themselves.
We introduce ourselves, or should we each give our little spiel?
Introduce yourself and your spiel.
Got it.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Beck. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently an attorney negotiator in the Domestic Violence Division of the DC Superior Court. So I don't think that it's at all an exaggeration to say that the Domestic Violence Clinic really kickstarted my career. Work for Victim Recovery of DC, which is an organization that represents survivors of crime in the District of Columbia in all sorts of cases, but they have specifically a very strong domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking practice. So my time being placed with them was absolutely essential for networking purposes and for getting my feet wet for the first time on real domestic violence cases, and to be basically seeing what I'm doing in my current job, but from the other side of accompanying people to court and participating in the negotiation process for protection order cases, which is now what I am currently doing. I directly out of law school, I was clerking for one of the judges that was the presiding judge of the Domestic Violence Division in the DC Superior Court. And I remember very clearly in that interview giving them my updated resume that included the domestic violence clinic on it, and them saying, oh, that's important. So I know for a fact that being in the clinic was an important part of the reason why I was hired by the presiding judge to be her law clerk. And then going straight from there, after that, I've worked in domestic violence at Break the Cycle, representing young survivors of domestic violence. All my clients were under the age of 24. A lot of them were in high school, a few of them were in middle school. And I think that having the foundation from the domestic violence clinic in a strong understanding of trauma-informed care and really understanding not just the legal side of things, but the interpersonal side of things and how trauma affects my clients was absolutely essential for making sure that I was prepared for that role of representing really young, impressionable clients who were going through a hard time in their life. After that, I went and worked at the Network for Victim Recovery, which is where I had my placement. So my placement did eventually turn into a job. There was a couple jobs in between there, but I did work there for a little while. And now I'm currently serving as the attorney negotiator. So anytime somebody in DC needs to get a protection order, they talk with me and I work with them to see if they can get an agreement to have the order put in place rather than having to go through the longer process of having a trial and reliving their trauma. And every day I'm using the lessons that I learned in the class with Professor Meyer of trauma, how it impacts people. And the thing is that people often think about trauma as being an issue that impacts survivors. But in my current role, I work with both sides. I work with the person who's filed for the case and the person that they filed against, and everyone is traumatized. And so having that basis of knowledge of how to work with somebody through trauma, how to help calm them down long enough that they can understand the information that I need to give them so they can navigate the court system is just completely invaluable. And so that holistic approach that we got in the domestic violence clinic is absolutely invaluable. And I really don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it's the basis, the foundation that my career was built on.
I just have to say, I actually learned some really important things about trauma from Nicole when she was my student. So she had it.
Thanks, Professor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Hotmeyer, and I currently am what is my title? Special Attorney Advisor to the Judge Advocate General for the U.S. Army on military justice reform, obviously specializing in domestic violence and sexual assault. So I advise the 3-star general in charge of the JAG Corps on how to make changes to better serve victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Before that, I served as the chief of the Special Victims and Family Violence Unit in Prince George's County, Maryland, as the head prosecutor of that unit, which is where my placement was when I was in the DV clinic back in 2008, I think, 2008 with Professor Meyer. And what I can say is, before I had this job, which is really a policy job that is really about changing the structure of military justice to remove it, obviously, from the commanders and better serve victims. I was a career prosecutor. I prosecuted for 13 years, I think, after law school, with maybe a year break doing civil litigation. And I think what I gained most, other than the job that kickstarted my career, is that the clinic allows you to kind of get out of your silo. As a prosecutor, you're concentrated on your case and the victim and what you think is justice. And you don't really realize that there are so many other things going on outside that are barriers for the victim, or that could possibly be barriers to the victim, or that could be a better outcome for them other than prosecution. I think that's what's so great about the DV clinic is you're in there with people who are doing, criminal prosecution, but you're also in there with people who are doing advocacy work, people who are just helping victims through resourcing projects, who are working in the family law sector. And you really can kind of understand that it's your silo. You're not really siloed. This victim is having to navigate criminal court, civil court, family law court, and that those different barriers can be the reason they don't want to go forward in a criminal case, can be the reason that, they don't pick up the phone when you call. It may be the reason that they want to drop the charges. And I think that it probably would have taken me a lot longer to get to that realization had I not done the DV clinic, because as a prosecutor, you're taught, this is your case, these are the facts of your case, go forward. You're not taught about the factors that go into domestic violence, that the power and control wheel. When I became a supervisor, I taught that because I thought it was so important that it's not, we don't prosecute in a vacuum. These types of cases are very different than general crime cases, because there is that bond between, whether it's a healthy bond or not, the bond between the perpetrator and the victim, and you need to be able to help them navigate the system. But I think that that's really what I gained the most out of the clinic. Is it's not just a prosecution clinic, it's not just an advocacy clinic, it's everybody working together, and you can really see how the system can be better if we all talk to each other and help that victim through all of the different legal processes.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Over to Parisa.
Hello, can everyone hear me? I'm the most recent graduate. I graduated in 2019. I did 3 clinics while I was at GW. One was Professor Meyer's clinic. I did one at Harvard Law, and then another one was a GW clinic as well. I have a very, very unconventional and non-traditional legal background. When I graduated in 2019, I did not take the bar exam straight out of school. I registered for the second one, but then I caught COVID and got stuck in Canada for 3 months. So I missed the second one as well. And now that the pandemic is somewhat over, I can say more confidently that I needed that downtime to really figure out what I wanted to do. I knew always that I didn't want to litigate. So that gave me some time to be really intentional with my next steps. So I ended up doing some policy work. And then last August, when the Taliban invaded Afghanistan, there was obviously the government toppled and there was an influx of Afghan refugees in the US. So I was called upon to serve at one of the safe havens. At the time, the safe havens were different military bases around the country. So I started at Quantico, and they called me in to do programming, to create programming for women and girls, specifically those who are facing abuse. And obviously, all of the teachings that Professor Meyer taught during the clinic were utilized at that time, because I had to learn how to speak with people. I had to really apply everything that we learned to know what questions to ask, know what boundaries to have, both for myself, also for the clients. And then when that safe haven closed, they sent me to a different one in New Mexico, where I joined the legal team, and then another one in Jersey, and then another one in Leesburg. And then I think I was there up until a month ago. And now I'm on this new project where we are trying to create a never before seen initiative to help different resettlement agencies around the nation create or give them legal resources to give to the specific Afghan refugee population. So again, there's a lot of knowing how to speak with people who are very, very traumatized, connecting with people in ways that I don't think you will ever learn in a courtroom. Obviously, having structure and knowing what steps to take is important, but I really don't think you can get there unless you're able to connect with the person that you're serving. And Professor Meyer's clinic really, really helped us learn how to do that in a safe way, both for ourselves and also for the clients. And now I've started my own nonprofit that is focusing on refugees and also incorporating different ways to have conversations about abuse and define abuse. And again, the teachings that she's taught us has really come into play.
Wow.
I don't know where to.
Don't leave it there, but so I think it's over to Jeff, right?
Yes.
So thank you to all 3 of you, and now over to Jeff and the PJAC.
All right, great. I'll just take this off for a second. Thank you so much, Lori, for having me and my wonderful colleagues here. It's just a pleasure to be with you. Like Joan, my clinic has gone through a number of iterations over the years since 1994. I started and I had hair, and I'm going to keep going until it comes back. So that's the goal. But several years ago, there was both student and community demand to do more for our low-income worker community in the metropolitan area. So I decided to try to heed that call. And over the last several years, students like those on my right have won unemployment compensation benefits before DC administrative law judges in almost 100 cases. We've represented over 70 low-income workers, most of whom are undocumented, and have recovered or settled cases for nearly $1 million over that period of time. And most recently, as Sue will remember, we have been representing a number of individuals who have been seeking name changes, many of whom are transgender, but not all. And it's often the case that those name changes will unlock the barriers that stood between them and applicable government benefits to which they may be entitled. So it's been a wonderful experience and a terrific ride for me, and hopefully for the many students I've had the great privilege of teaching over the years, including those to my right. We have an exercise at the beginning of our class, usually, in which I ask students to close their eyes and to imagine the unimaginable. That is that they have been, for example, fired as an attorney. Shocking, unpleasant, harrowing, emotional. And I asked them, what kinds of qualities and characteristics would you want in the lawyer that you're going to hire? And we write all those characteristics and qualities on the board, and none of them are good brief writer, best at Westlaw, tremendous oral advocate. Rather, the qualities and characteristics that the students are looking for in a lawyer that they would have to hire are compassion, competence, sound judgment, empathy, I guess some of those softer skills. And then we finish writing our list, and I say, great list. These are the qualities and characteristics that you want to have when you become a lawyer. And these are also qualities and characteristics that lawyers have that you don't learn in law school, except really in clinic. And so while we do brief writing and we do oral argument and we do some of the harder legal skills in the clinic, one of our goals is for students to develop those skills of competence and judgment and sophistication and empathy and a real understanding of how the legal system and clients work, that will distinguish them in their careers from being just a lawyer to being, like these folks, really, really outstanding lawyers. And if we do that, we've accomplished our goal. All my students are my favorites, but the three to my right are my really favorites. And so I'm happy to introduce Lindsay Niles, Sue Choi, and James Hanaway, who will tell you a little bit about their wonderful careers that they've had since I had the privilege of having them in my clinic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Niles. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a managing attorney at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. It's the protection and advocacy program for people with disabilities in the district. And when I was a 3L in law school and I was thinking about clinical work, for me, I was so drawn to the public justice advocacy clinic because I always had an interest and passion for disability justice work. And at that time at GW, there was no disability law classwork or coursework that I could take. And the clinic for me was just life-changing because I had the opportunity to not only learn some of the substantive areas of disability justice, but also apply it in working with people who are impacted, people with disabilities. And at that time, the clinic had a disability component. For me, the clinic was huge for my career trajectory. I obtained opportunities from the clinic to work at the Department of Justice, out of law school, doing Olmstead enforcement work. At that time, I graduated in 2010. At that time, the Obama administration had a huge focus on Olmstead, which is a Supreme Court case that is like the Brown v. Board for disability rights, where the court found that it is discrimination to unnecessarily segregate people with disabilities in institutions when they can be served in the community. And so the clinic really, for me, helped me work with individuals and kind of decenter myself from class work to focus on a client-centered, a client-focused way of practice. And after working at the DOJ for about a year and a half, doing Olmstead enforcement work, it was critical for me to my next job because I began working as a staff attorney at the where I'm at now at DRDC. And I actually worked on a statement of interest at the DOJ that was in support of DRDC and the other co-counsel in the case. And I did that for 6 years. And then I worked at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights as counsel, doing impact litigation on behalf of individuals who are incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prison System and in the DC Department of Corrections, to address things, related to disability issues around failure to provide constitutionally adequate medical care and treatment, essentially, trying to challenge torture of people who, DC residents who are incarcerated all throughout the country. And then I came back to DRDC as a managing attorney. And right now I'm directing the work to help make sure that people with disabilities are included and in their communities, and they're integrated in their communities. And I don't know if I didn't do the clinic, if I'd be here really doing my purpose. I've always wanted to do work that impacts racial justice and people with disabilities are the largest marginalized group. And for me, the clinic was instrumental in me being able to do that work.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Hanaway. I'm currently an associate at Sanford Heisler Sharp, which is a national plaintiffs firm. I mostly work representing victims of discrimination in the workplace, both race and gender discrimination, on behalf of individuals and classes. We do a lot of other interesting work. We also do some work in the opioid litigation, representing Virginia municipalities. And I just started my first case actually representing a victim of sexual assault and their tort claims. So it's an interesting practice. It's an interesting firm, but I do have a public justice advocacy clinic to thank for getting me in the door and affirming my commitment to doing work on behalf of workers. I remember interviewing at the firm and working at the clinic at the same time, and being able to say very convincingly that I was passionate about the work because I was doing the work. And looking back, there's a lot that I took from it in terms of hard skills. There's something to be said for, doing something for the first time with adult supervision. So I drafted my first complaint. I took my first direct examination. I won my first case. In an unemployment case. What else did I do? I settled my first case. That was great.
Maybe you lost your first case too.
I don't think I lost my first case. But today I can do those things with a little more confidence, not starting from zero. I'm not doubting myself constantly like I did during clinic. And then in terms of soft skills, there's a lot to be said there as well. I think people have talked about, just the emotional work that we do and like recognizing people's pain. There's a lot of that in employment work. If somebody's a victim of discrimination, there's a dignitary interest at stake that is not just, a sum of money, which is sometimes what it can feel like when you're just reading cases. So I have Professor Gutman to thank for giving me a deep appreciation for what's actually at stake in litigation, which is not just money. What else? I think that about covers it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sue Choi. I graduated from GW in 2018. I was in Professor Gutman's clinic in the fall of 2017. I'm now an attorney at Rellman Colfax, which is a civil rights law firm in Washington, D.C. And in my practice, I represent people who have been discriminated against because of their race, gender, disability, or other protected characteristic. And I work to enforce civil rights statutes. And my cases are in the space of fair housing, fair lending, police accountability, education. So it's a really interesting practice. And During law school, clinic was by far my favorite experience. It was so much fun. It was incredibly rewarding. And I was able to develop such a wide variety of skills. And I think that's thanks to Professor Gutman entrusting student attorneys with a lot of responsibility. And I feel like we have the autonomy to sort of run the case as we see fit. You know, we're doing all the talking with the clients, gathering the information and sort of making the strategic decisions. And Professor Gutman would intervene only if we're about to commit malpractice. Like it was a very wide latitude of, you know, reasonable approaches we could take, and we were allowed to like run with what we thought best. And I think that really helped, you know, me become the lawyer I am today in terms of just being able to dive into a case and, you know, confidently be able to do things, as James mentioned, I'm like doing for the first time, but I have that foundation to draw upon from clinic work. And I can tell you from being on like hiring committees at my firm, like clinic experience is something that I think a lot of employers, especially in the public interest space, value, because, you know, you see the commitment that the student has to public interest causes, and you know they've like had that responsibility of representing a client and running the case, and just have had developed a lot of skills. So I can say that really clinic has been such an instrumental part of my legal career.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the room? Or comments, exactly. I know that some people in the room are clinic alums, and if people have their own observations to add, we'd also welcome that. All right, well, people are thinking. I have some questions for this panel. I need my turn. So a question for you all. Obviously, when you were at GW, there were plenty of wonderful doctrinal classes to take, but you opted for taking a clinic. Can anyone who'd like to volunteer, or multiple people, can you talk about how the learning was different in a clinical setting than in the doctrinal classroom? Great.
What I remember from the domestic violence clinic in terms of our textbook, instead of getting a textbook, we were given a binder that was like this thick, that just had everything you could possibly need to know about the cycle of violence, about trauma-informed care, about the law, about every aspect of the way that domestic violence impacts people legally, emotionally, and as a human. And to have this resource that I still refer to today, that isn't just a textbook written by one person, but a collection of all of these different perspectives and ideas and voices, and a lot of them survivors, a lot of them advocates, to really get this holistic view of what this is like, and not just a legal perspective. It was just an absolute game changer. And then on top of that, because each person, like you mentioned, each person in the clinic was doing a different kind of work, we were able to learn from our peers really well. And I remember that one of my peers was doing domestic violence in Maryland, and my focus was domestic violence in DC. And he gave a presentation about domestic violence law in Maryland. And I'm still referring back to that all the time when I think about, oh, you've got a case in Maryland. Here's how this works, because I was in the clinic, and one of my co-students was able to teach me about that. So it's just an incredible experience to get that much more holistic approach than,
Besides the learning experience being the first time I felt like a lawyer, being in the clinic, the coursework looking at poverty law for me was the first time I was exposed to legal training that looked at the ways in which the law and the legal system serves as an impediment to justice, whether it's racial justice, social justice, disability justice, how understanding that framework when you're representing your clients. And it was the first time I felt uncomfortable with the prospect of going into the world, working with people who are marginalized, and using the law, which often oppresses them, or the legal system, which often oppresses them, and being their advocate. And so I sat in that discomfort, and the clinic really helped me manage that challenge, that the legal system often oppresses the people that you're working with. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't still challenge the legal system. It doesn't mean you shouldn't let your clients guide you in how to address these problems. But that's not something that I got from the classroom. And for me, that just was kind of a game changer for me.
All right. Another question for you all. Can anyone or any group of people, any of you address the difference in the supervision that you have been able to get, or that you were able to get in the clinics versus on the job?
I do have a bone to pick with Professor Gutman. He wouldn't answer the simple questions that I had. I was like, we need a certificate of service for this. He's like, read the rule. I did appreciate that. And he did that on things big and small, right? He let me learn by teaching me to learn for myself, which is a helpful exercise because very often as an associate or a junior attorney, sometimes you do, and you're working in the public interest in particular, you don't have a lot of peers and you do have to figure things out by yourself. You just don't have the resources to get the job done. So teaching that self-reliance was good for me. And the partners that I work with today, they do actually tell me the answers to the simple questions, which is nice. But I do have a little bit more self-reliance because of what I went through in clinic.
A big difference for me was when Professor Meyer would check in with us one-on-one on a weekly basis, I believe. I think that practice really set us up for learning how to manage the vicarious trauma that we can sometimes feel as a result of the work that we're doing. And that really helped build healthy practices that would prolong burnout, I think. And so learning how to do that, building on those skills really, really has contributed to, I think, hopefully the longevity of what I'm doing. And I don't see that very often in the real world.
Yeah, I kind of want to add to that because I think it's so important. We're very busy. Lawyers are very, very busy, and our supervisors are even busier. And it was really important to have that check-in because when you're dealing with these really tough cases, they take a lot out of you, especially when you're a young attorney and it may be the first time that, you have experienced someone who's been strangled, or you may have experienced someone who's, been abused for a long period of time. So I really appreciated being able to not only talk about like how the clinical work was going and how I was doing as a lawyer, but how I was doing as a person. And when I became a supervisor in Prince George's County, I incorporated that in my supervision of my attorneys, not just checking in on them on how are your cases going, but how are you doing? Because I knew, how it affected me as a young attorney. And I wanted to be able to kind of, pay that forward. And so I think that, it helped make me not only a better lawyer, but a better supervisor when I became one.
There was a great sigh of gratitude.
I can die happy now.
Nancy.
So along those lines, I have a question for Professor Meyer and Professor Gutman. Every time you start a new clinic, you have a new crop of students to work with all over again. And I know both of you have been doing this for a very long time. It must be invigorating and tiring all at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about what gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you come here semester after semester and year after year?
That's a lovely question. Thank you, Nancy. I'm actually on medical leave this semester and not teaching this semester. And while I've been grateful for the freedom it's given me to deal with what I have to deal with, I really miss my students because, especially as you get older, they're young, they're enthusiastic, they're passionate, they're drinking up the opportunity to learn and to make use of their learning. And it is so inspiring working with them. So and I also love how I get to know very different people each semester. They all come in with their own personal experience and history and attitudes. And it's just fun to get to learn about all these different people and to get to connect, as I think these alums are describing. I get to connect somewhat personally with each of them to some degree. And it's just a really rewarding mentoring role. And it feeds me. It keeps me, when I get somewhat despairing about either the work or the world, to be honest, the students keep me from despair because they're inspiring and they're hopeful. And even when they're struggling, which we all have been, there's just so much possibility there and they're sincere. So thank you for the question.
I don't think I could have said it any better, really. I have nothing more to add, but I'll have to come up with something. As mentioned, I teach, I have taught civil procedure for the first year students, which is a wonderful experience. They're completely green, not knowing what a case is, who a plaintiff is, and so on. And that's itself a wonderful experience. But I really do enjoy working with students who are mostly in their third years, but also in their second. Is that the amount of progress and wisdom and knowledge and that developed over just a couple of years of law school is really extraordinary. And so when they come in the door the first day of clinic, they're not always ready to do all the cases, but they are so ready to be lawyers at this point. And the enthusiasm that they have for the legal profession, the place that they've decided to chart their careers is inspiring, and it's gratifying, and it's it really does get me up. It does get me up in the morning, and it's not only the students, but also to watch the students interact with their clients. Because I can just visualize that happening over and over and over again for the next 40 or 50 years, and to see the excitement and enthusiasm and fear, right, that they have during those first interactions, and how do I structure this interview, and what do I do when the client says something that I'm not really expecting, and watching them learn largely on their own in this way is really a wonderful experience. It's really irreplaceable.
Yes. Hold on, there's a mic coming over to you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Patton, and I went to the law school a long, long time ago, but I did a landlord-tenant clinic. And now that's been decades since I was in law school. One of the things that struck me about that clinic is even if I had not been a lawyer, there were things that I took away that I would use in my everyday life. And so I'm interested if any of you have any experience that you think shaped you or your view of the world beyond just being a lawyer. And I think Lindsay sort of spoke a little bit to that, but I'd be interested in hearing from others.
Thanks. That's a great question.
Go ahead. Yes. I mean, I think you can't do this clinic without it kind of affecting every part of your life and who you are. I came in, I've always been interested in gender-based violence, although I hate that word. I like to call it power-based violence, but, and I think it just, I was very focused on, I want to prosecute gender-based violence because I think that's the solution to the problem. And I think what the clinic helped me see probably a lot sooner than everybody who's preceded me as a prosecutor in that space is that and I say it all the time when I guest lecture or I speak in Professor Meyer's class, is that prosecution is not going to solve the problem, and that it's like a problem rooted in our society. And I think a lot of the readings that we read in that big binder kind of help open your eyes to that. And so it helped me become a better lawyer, but it also helped me realize that, I have to use the skills that I learned, not only in my practice, but in the work that I do outside of the practice, in how I raise my children and how I advocate on behalf of people just in my daily life. Because, you can, from 9 to 5, although no lawyer works from 9 to 5, you can advocate, but if you're not living your values outside of it, then what is that work for? And I think that's really what Professor Meyer's class kind of shows you. Sorry.
My comment is quick. We were working with a client who was unable to appear in court several times because of her housing situation and her financial situation. And so what that taught me at the time was that nothing is black and white. And I think oftentimes in doctrinal classes, we learn that things have to be black and white. But in practice, seeing that showed me that everybody is going through something, and the approach that we have with them has to be curious and non-judgmental and solution-oriented. And like I said, I chose not to practice law. And so even still, that is something that I apply to everybody that I meet. And I think it's really, really important, especially when you're trying to help people get to a certain outcome, knowing why they're doing what they're doing and being curious and helpful about it, I think makes all the difference.
And just to add to that, I think the clinic's client-centered approach has been so valuable, like in my career, in my life, and for my personal growth, seeing the client as a person. And in the cases I had in the clinic, our client would come in with one issue, and it would turn out there are, multiple things going on, and you're trying to serve the client. The focus isn't necessarily like making the legal argument or winning the case. It's what can you do to serve the client? And, and that requires really communicating with the client, really figuring out what they need and want from the process. And I think I've been able to apply that approach in my cases and just in life generally when interacting with people.
Yeah, just one quick thing for me is, I think I gained an appreciation for what Washington, D.C. is. I think your first day here, you kind of get the impression that D.C. is this bubble. And I remember my first day of clinic, my client's cell phone had become disconnected, and I had to bike to her house and find her and get her an update on the litigation. And it was far, far from here. I think I formed connections with my clients in a lot of different parts of DC. And it's not just downtown and some agencies. It's a real city. And I think we owe a commitment to the city we live in to give back to it.
Please.
Good evening, Mohammed Shuman. I'm also an alum of the clinics, and I was Professor Gutman's civil procedure student in first year, so I can attest how fun it was.
I'm smiling under my
So following up on James' remarks, I was wondering how the clinic has been able to connect with clients during the COVID-19 pandemic, and just what opportunities for growth in these challenges the student attorneys were presented with.
Well, I guess I could take a swing at that one. What do you say about COVID? It's been a challenge because one of the great gifts of doing the work that we do is frankly, the face-to-face interaction with our clients, to see them, to be with them, to experience them, to commune with them, and to help them. And in partnership to try to accomplish their legal objectives. And when they're in a rectangle or they're on the phone, you just do miss some of that. But the needs of many during the pandemic has become, so significant that we all have to sort of rise to the technological challenge and get over our disconnection physically and to reestablish a connection emotionally in some other way. And so the students have had to sort of negotiate how to do that. And it hasn't always been easy. And we had 2 hearings today, which were both one by phone, both by essentially on Zoom, and connecting with the client and connecting with the judge is so much more difficult when you're just seeing them on a screen. One of the things that hopefully we learn in the clinic is that lawyers have to be adaptable. And there's no challenge more than what we've had in the last 2 years to make lawyers adaptable. So we've had to rise to the challenge and make it happen.
Thanks. I'll just add a couple
question.
things. It is a great question. Yeah. I think that, obviously the pandemic required a lot of technical and technological adaptations from all of us. And I think the clinics, I actually remember walking into Professor Gutman's office in March 2020 and saying, I don't think I'm going to take any more cases right now. And he was like, what, are you crazy? I said, no, I'm done. But just the clinics really didn't miss a beat. We moved to the Zoom platform very quickly and never really dipped in our caseload at all. But it has required a lot of creativity. I'll say that the school has been incredibly supportive of us getting what we needed to continue to meet with our clients. So this winter, when it got cold, in the fall, we had started meeting with our clients who were not vaccinated because the school was requiring vaccinations. Our clients who were not vaccinated were coming to meet with us in person on the patio of the clinic, those who are interested in coming over. We have a beautiful back patio now. Those of you who haven't been to the clinic building in a while, you should come see it. And then it got cold and we called Dean Tammy and she said, well, we'll get you a heater. So now we have an outdoor heater. So we were able to actually continue to meet with clients who wanted to come meet with us face to face. So that was great. I'll also say that it demanded a lot of pedagogical alterations and adaptations on all of our parts, both the way we taught, but also what we were teaching. I think those, everyone who practices knows that you had to get up to speed on client interviewing skills over Zoom, on litigation over WebEx, and it gave us a whole new area that we really had to teach and give readings in, and expressing empathy over Zoom. I know, Joan, I'll let you jump in, and I'll just say the other thing that has been amazing to me is to see the innovation that that the pandemic sparked in all the clinical programs. Just the number of new areas in which people are practicing in because the need arose and was so great is amazing to see. All of the new programs. We've created many new access to justice programs to help with the backlogs at court. Those changes just keep coming. So I think it's been really exciting to see.
And Lori is really at the helm of most of those changes. She gets most of the credit. I just want to add to that question that it was very interesting for me with my model of students being placed in the field. And what I kind of immediately pivoted to was, we may all hate trying to do a mock interview online, but guess what? You're going to be practicing law online for the foreseeable future. So we're all going to learn together how to do this as best we can online, because the practice of law is shifting along with us and the law school and the rest of the world. And so some of my students were in placements where the practice continued to some degree in person, but most of them not. And I can't recall about your office, Melissa, but I think you stopped prosecuting for a while, like cases, the courts closed in some ways and everything backed up. But in a lot of the civil practices that my students were plugging into, they continued to do the work in the same way that Lori and Jeff were describing their clinics doing the work. And so the students were having that experience. And I tried to ask them, how different do you find it? Do you feel like you're picking up on your clients' feelings in that interview? How are you figuring that out? Anyway, so I just tried to use the new venue to raise the questions of how their skills are developing in that context and how they can adapt them to that context. But it's been challenging.
So I see we're headed towards the end. So I wanted to give the last word to our amazing panelists and just start down at this end and ask any closing thoughts about what you took away from the clinic, and to spark your minds. I'll also say, you heard me say at the beginning, we're really trying very hard to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to take a clinic here at GW. What your thoughts on even having a mandatory clinic requirement, but any closing thoughts? And we'll start down here.
So I was very excited to hear that new clinics are opening up. And I think it's an experience that I would highly recommend to anyone, not just because you're able to sort of apply the skills you've learned in the legal setting and, do the lawyering, but also because of the softer skills that Professor Gutman talked about that you can build and how much you can grow as a person. I think the legal profession needs a lot of that. So I would be pro mandatory clinic, but we'll hear others.
Yeah, I'm for whatever gets the world more clinics and more law students taking clinical classes. I got a ton out of it. And it's what I tell every GW law student who, asks me to coffee. I say, go talk to Professor Gutman. And I think there should be more Professor Gutmans and more people learning from people like him.
So, I agree with everything that the other panelists have said. I would also add just that the clinics help prepare you to interview and build relationships with people who are in crisis. And if you want to do public justice work, if you want to do any type of justice work after graduation, it's critical to build those skills of client interviewing and also getting prepared for, and I know some other folks were talking about secondary trauma, getting prepared for that and getting practical skills from your professors and how to deal with secondary trauma in the work, so you can keep doing it for as long as possible.
I am team mandatory. Like I said, I did 3 clinics while I was at law school. I would have done more if I could have. I think law schools, like medical school, they do a residency. So I think we should do it too. I think it would change the culture of the legal profession entirely. Actually, I think those soft skills are needed to humble some folks. And also for those of us who do want to do justice-oriented work, I think it's a tremendous opportunity to know what you're getting into and prolong your ability to remain in that field.
I think I agree with everybody on the panel. There is so much public justice work that needs to be done. There is such a need, and I think every probably organization for young law students who want to learn and who want to be in the courtroom, but also it gives you a leg up so that when you do get that first job, you don't feel as overwhelmed as someone who hasn't ever, set foot in a courtroom, done a deposition, been in front of a judge, because you've done it before. You've done it, and you've done it with the help of a professor who has decades of experience who can help guide you through it. And so it just makes your entry into the legal profession, I think, that much easier. And as a supervisor who's taken a lot of the domestic clinic, the domestic violence clinic attorneys, we've had amazing success, and people who have said, "Oh, I just want to do a little bit of public interest work, but I don't want to do this work for my career," and then they've changed their mind. So I just think it's so valuable.
I would echo what everyone said and just really highlight that it's not just benefit as a lawyer, it's not just benefit as a human being, it's not just benefit to our community. It's also just on a very practical level, really nice to have a professor who knew me personally and knew my style as an attorney, who could be a reference for me. And then on top of that, all the networking that I did, being a part of the community, serving the community, and having made those connections. So that when it came time for me to find a job, I had people that my employers could reach out to that really actually knew me on a personal level, as opposed to some of my other professors where I was just kind of an anonymous face in a lecture hall. So just on a practical level, it's very, very good too.
Thank you so much. So I have 2 thank yous and 2 invitations. The first thank you to this wonderful panel. Thank you so much. All of you were wonderful. It was great hearing your insights. We have gifts for you when you leave. Thanks to all of you for coming and for joining us. We know it's been, for many of you, a very long day of meetings. So thank you for ending your day with us. Actually, 3 thank yous. Thank you to Andrea Willis-Johnson and Wallace Grant. Like everything, pulled everything together for this event and did so beautifully. So I'm really grateful to both of you. And 2 invitations. 1, to come back for the rest of our series. We have 4 more social impact showcase speaker series with 4 more events. And we'll send you invitations to those. And please join us at the Ritz at 6:30. So thank you for coming.